Good morning and welcome back to our Ask the Agronomist video series. I am Kyla Watson here with Phil on. Phil, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Once again from a screen away, but we're getting better at it every time. But hopefully soon we'll be able to be back in the same at least field.
Yes, I know. Won't that be exciting? Who would have thought middle of winter that we'd have a little break here and then we'll be hopping right into the field.
Yeah, yep. It's it's crazy, but it's been a very quick spring. I mean, I think a lot of people are. It's been busy, but I think everybody is thankful given the conditions we've had the last few years. So.
Yes, I agree. We've heard a lot of reports all the way from North Dakota down to southern Iowa, and farmers are getting work done. It's been a good week for farmers across Latham country.
Yeah, reports from all over Latham country that are coming in really, really good. Drier conditions than expected, and just an amazing amount of crop that's been planted in a week. I mean, we always talk about that. It seems like with harvest, how quick can we get it out? Things like that. How quick can we plant? But in this case, a lot of corn and beans have gone in the ground in the last week.
Absolutely. All right. Well, today we're going to be talking about field prep and specifically kind of preparing that optimal seed bed for the seeds.
Yeah, I think it's a timely topic. It may seem like we're missing the boat a little bit, but there's a lot of corn in the ground right now. So the focus has shifted to soybeans. Some planted soybeans earlier, which is great. But the focus has kind of shifted now that corn's in the ground to mainly soybeans. And the reason that this is really still timely is it seems like I'm hearing a lot of this spring, but farmers keep saying these are some of the best soil conditions I've ever planted into. Oh, that just worked up, really well. Seeing a lot of dust flying, which is typically a good sign. We're getting into areas of the fields. I've heard guys saying that they're planting areas of the fields that they haven't planted in years. So that's a good thing. But we also got to remember as the dust keeps rolling and we see soil conditions continue to dry out, we may get a rain here and there. How much should we be working the soil? Is it getting too dry? What are the conditions where we may put those beans at jeopardy? So, one of the things I was looking up just to kind of see where we're at in the season. Now, obviously, I keep answering this question, and it's just getting to be the first part of May, and we're sitting really well. But if you look at the GDUs we're sitting at least here in our area, obviously I can't look over everybody's territory, but just comparing averages, right now we're sitting at about 90 GDUs, which if you remember from previous times we've discussed this, that's almost what it takes to get corn out of the ground. But this is from April 10th. So just kind of looking over the back of the last 20 days or so, we've got about 90 GDUs. We're behind about 20 GDUs on that, surprisingly. We're behind on rainfall as well. That's probably not a surprise. We're in our area here, we're at about a half an inch of rain. We're behind by about upwards of 2 inches on average, where we typically sit over the last 50 years. The other thing that's also exciting, especially talking about beans, is soil temperature. And we just talked about this a couple weeks ago, but we're sitting at mid to upper 50s right now with temperatures in the future, the forecast looking even higher. So that's great news. That's great news for corn and beans. Obviously, both of them like warm soil temperatures. They come out of the ground quick, and that's what we want. But all these things add up to remind us that it's important to assess the moisture levels in the soil as we start, planting our beans or continue planting our beans in some of these drier than normal conditions.
Yeah, I think it'd be safe to say that the corn that is in and hopefully will be in soon has been tucked away nicely, and now it's time to focus on our soybeans.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of the fun things to me about soybeans. When you go out and scout fields, if you're done and it's time to maybe check on how things are going to see if those radicals are pushing down through the soil and the seeds have germinated and so forth. I mean, soybeans germinate pretty quickly. You'll see them swell up and start to push out that first root. So it's fun to go out there even 24 to 48 hours after planting and see if you got those seeds in the right moisture conditions, because that'll give you an idea if they're germinating at the same time or not, and so forth, if they're swelled up. So I think right now the biggest thing is to talk about the tillage that's going on. And there's a lot of tillage being done. I've heard even some say a couple passes of tillage. So one of the things I think it's important to remember is the more tillage passes you do, the more moisture you're going to work out of the ground. So every pass that you make, obviously, like most people believe, you can get some of that moisture out of the ground once you break it up, open it up, and so forth, things like that. It allows that air to be able to hit that moisture. Carbon is burning off and so forth, and you're removing some of that moisture. But the problem with that is if you're not planning on planting, maybe you're running the field cultivator ahead of the planter by a few days or something, or you're mixing the herbicide in there somewhere. You got to remember in these kind of conditions, it's probably best to work right ahead of the planter. That would be my suggestion, to keep those soil conditions as moist as possible. We've caught a little rain or so here this week and in different parts, maybe, different amounts. Obviously, we're in that spring storm period. But for the most part, we're sitting still really dry. So, maybe slow down on the tillage and do it right before planting to conserve some of that moisture. That way it doesn't evaporate back up. Obviously it moves up overnight and so forth, but that comes in the next reminder is making sure you get those beans deep enough. And there's good and bad that come with planting soybeans. Some are no-tilling, which is great. I would highly encourage, considering that if you are set up to do that. But on the other side of that, you got to make sure that the moisture level is where it needs to be to germinate those beans. So if you're doing tillage, make sure that you're putting beans in the moisture and in that level of moisture. And if it's at, if the moisture level is down to 1.5 inches, then put them at 1.5 inches. I wouldn't be afraid to do that. The soil conditions are good, and they're going to come up from that. I promise. That once you get over about 2.5 inches, then soybeans really kind of start to struggle. But sink them down there deep enough that they're able to hit that moisture, because you want them to come out of the ground at the same time.
Would you just touch real quick on the role of tillage and then what the soil could do maybe after a hard rain? So how it can lend to soil sealing and problems there.
Yeah, it seems like that's another topic we discuss a lot too. And this is something, like we said, we've been seeing a lot of the soil conditions, in my opinion, from even what I've seen around here, in the prairie pothole region. I mean, it just working up really well. Not near as many clods, just it seems like after the fall tillage that got done, it just worked up really nice. However, that also means that you have finer particles out there. So when you do that second pass of tillage with the field cultivator, essentially what you're doing is you're kind of crumbling that soil structure, to some extent destroying the soil structure what it was and making it fine so that you can plant into it easier. However, when you get a hard rain, that basically tends to, when it comes down on that finer particle size, it doesn't infiltrate into the soil as well. So it ends up sealing it and hardening it off, and then you get runoff. So typically you get less water infiltration after a lot of tillage is done. And so less, you're not holding as much moisture in the soil, which is what you want. And then you end up with problems with the soil surface sealing. Another key point to this that I've seen, more and more every year, it seems like, I see the big rollers going down the road. Plenty of farmers using those for great reasons. However, they can have some negative effects, and this is one of them that, in my mind, we need to be cautious about, making sure that we're not using them ahead of a hard rain. If you see a storm coming, don't. My recommendation, because we have opportunities afterwards, obviously, it's not ideal to roll once the soybeans are up, but you can still do it in the right window. We've talked about that. But my suggestion would not be to go out there and roll right before a hard thunderstorm. Wait it out, see when the conditions improve, and then go out and roll that soybean field and push those rocks down and so forth. But that really gives soybeans a hard time getting out of the ground when you roll it, because that roller compacts that finer surface, and then you get a really hard sealed surface that they can't push up through. So it just makes it really hard for soybeans to get out of the ground when they have to try and push through that, and that's where we end up with busted off, swollen and busted off hypocotyls and so forth. And so that can be an issue, and hopefully we won't see that, but that would be my recommendation, to not do that ahead of a storm.
Okay, keep an eye on the 5 to 7 day forecast if possible.
Yeah, it seems like from what I've been hearing that soil conditions are really good. So if we have the capacity to take on some of that moisture, then great. Let's get, if it rains, that's a good thing. wait it out a few days, and then go out and do that pass. So that would be my suggestion. I think it'd be wise, especially this spring, given the moisture conditions we're at. It won't hurt to wait a little bit afterwards to roll it.
Okay, very good. And then just to wrap up our topic for today, let's just talk real quick about cover crops.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. One that we talk about, it seems like every fall and spring, and then this is one of the exceptions right now. I feel like we're in the little bit of the exception that we talk about, and that's because if you have cereal rye, cover crop that does really great over the winter time, comes up really strong in the spring. If it's growing out there and greening up really well right now, then you need to remember that plant, which is just about to go reproductive, and it is taking up a lot of water. So it's taking some of that water that your corn or your beans need. If you're going to probably beans, most likely, if you're planning on planting green into that, you should probably consider to kill it early to terminate it earlier this year than wait, because you could end up in a situation where it has stolen some of that moisture that your beans are going to need.
Okay, very good. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add this morning?
No, like you, I think we're all excited that finally we have a spring that's, enjoyable to go through. It's been fast paced, but that's a good thing. When it comes to farming, we're all happy, especially with the things that are going on. It's good to focus on, something that we enjoy, and it's more fun when it's going like it is this year.
Absolutely. Focus on the good that we have.
Exactly. Be thankful.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us this morning, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Have a good day.